When it comes to the music business, its complexities are either a hit or miss depending on who you ask. If you were to ask Static Major, he would have told you that this here industry they call music ain't all it's cracked up to be. In fact, he'd tell you straight up to not even get involved. However, he was, and it possibly cost him his life. In the music business, the artists are the main product, but their fans tend to not pay any attention to the machines behind the scenes, exhausting their resources to transform your favorite artists into what they are today. Deriving from Louisville, Kentucky, Static Major may not be the most recognizable name out there, but his lengthy list of hits definitely reserves a spot in your memory bank. Does Aaliyah ring a bell? What about Genuine? Lil Wayne? Destiny's Child? Jodeci? His artistic genius has been behind some of the top records to have ever existed, and you didn't even know it. Unfortunately, his life was cut short in 2008 after an eerie accident in a hospital resulted in him losing his life. And get this, it was all the hospital's fault. His untimely passing revealed chilling revelations that still have the people questioning to this day: accidental demise or sacrifice? Playa. If you know anything about Static Major, then you know his resume of hits on top of hits and the group that got him there. But before we dive into the debatable, underappreciated R&B trio spawning out of Jodeci's very own subcamp, we have to get into his journey before he and Aaliyah secretly became intertwined more than just musically. Oh yeah, we gonna talk about it. Born Stephen Garrett, Static was a musical prodigy before he even knew he was. Growing up, he was surrounded by the melodic hums and rhythmic beats music had to offer. His father was a talented musician, and his mother was the choir director at their local church. His older sister also wanted in on the action, choosing to puncture the black and white keys of the piano. Seeing his family be so in tune with music made a little Stephen curious and eager to join in on the fun. By age 3, Stephen was already yapping his little gums off, singing in Sims whenever he could. He'd been given the opportunity to sing at the local TV station. Being from Louisville, he and everyone close to Stephen knew that the dude was beyond talented. However, when he got to high school, parts of his gifts would be suppressed while he was in class. The culture of one creating random beats on their desks during long school hours had also been a part of Stephen's everyday school regimen. His friends and peers described him as a cool and funny guy who was always rapping and making beats on his desk. A ladies' man that hid his singing abilities from many. Following his passions and in his mother's footsteps, he formed a gospel group that is sometimes battle against other local singing groups. Unbeknownst to him, some of the people he was in competition with would later become a part of the trio he joined later on in his journey in life. Inspired by the greats like Stevie Wonder and Prince, Stephen knew he wanted to do big things in music and was making moves that'd get him there. But before he arrived to his destination in Devontae's swing mob, tragedy struck when his sister and only sibling passed away suddenly at the age of 22 from supposed congestive heart failure. Her sudden death took a huge toll on Stephen's psyche, as you'd expect, and it caused him to act out in ways he never did before. His parents, noticing his acts of rebellion, thought they'd take matters into their own hands. This is where Burger King enters the conversation. Let me explain. Burger King Academy, a program for underprivileged kids who are most likely to drop out of high school, entered Stephen's life at the right time. Transferring his beat-making desk from his previous school to this one, the alternative school took notice of Stephen's talents and persuaded him to sing the national anthem. Oh, say can he sing! His rendition of Francis Scott Key's controversial hymn won him a scholarship to the University of Louisville. Following his graduation circa 1991, another opportunity was a brewin' on the other side of town. Smokey, Digital Black, and another guy were going around town singing with their newly formed group, A Touch of Class. Along the way, one of their anonymous group members ended up throwing in the towel. After Smokey came across Stephen at his Louisville University, now short one member, Smoke asked him to be a part of his group. A Touch of Class now consisted of Smokey, Digital Black, and Stephen, who'd go by the name Static Major. Joining the group when he did served him well, because it was during this time Devontae Swing from Jodeci was seeking out talent to be a part of his new recording collective, Swing Mob. Smoke had already run across Devontae one day, who loved what he was hearing and decided to follow up. Originally, Devontae tried to put Smoke into 2 other groups at the time, Intro and a group called H-Town, which I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with. Smokey wasn't here for splitting the band up, insisting that Devontae hear his boy Static sing a few lines, and before he and his group knew it, they'd gotten gotten the nod of approval from D-Swing, who then flew them out to New Jersey and officially signed them to his Swing Mob collective. They'd uproot yet again to Rochester, New York, where they spent all day and night working on music, perfecting their craft alongside Swing Mob's other artists. An album under Swing Mob never did get released, and by the late 90s, Playa, along with everybody else in Devontae's camp, wanted out. They weren't reaping the fruit of their labor, and some vocalized that Devontae was solely extracting their talents to be used on his groups, that being Jodeci's upcoming albums. Playa, along with everybody else on the mob, can be heard on Jodeci's third album, The Show, The After Party, The Hotel, and a little on their second album, Diary of a Mad Band. Quite frankly, everybody was over the lack of compensation, mistreatment, and no recognition and dipped. Before Devontae knew it, all of his artists ceased to exist except for Playa and one of his girl groups. All that changed around 1997 when Playa decided to follow the rest of the Swing Mobsters out the door and into other recording contracts. Devontae was mad, and with Static being the closest to him, it pained him to leave the homie, but leaving the homie served him right, since Static's group would not only sign a new deal with Blackground Records, the same label Aaliyah had been signed to at the time, but scored their first big hit with the song Cheers to You, garnering a certified high ranking on the Billboard R&B chart and ending up becoming the most requested video on BET. Unfortunately, their album of the same name didn't live up to the hype of their hit single, and their new label just didn't see eye to eye with the group on a creative level, preferring the guys to be suited up compared to their big jersey streetwear style they had going for them under Swing Mob. Their conflicting views would get their second album shelved, and soon enough, like their second album, Playa would become defunct. Just because his group parted ways didn't mean their friendship did. Songwriting was a huge part of Static's treasure chest of gifts. Choosing to focus on behind-the-scenes work turned out to be the best thing for him, and truth be told, Static preferred being behind the scenes anyway. During his stay on Blackground, fellow Swing Mob alumni Missy Elliott and Timbaland had also uprooted and sought refuge at the same label, being the dream team behind some of Aaliyah's, a good 90% I'd say, best work. While Tim and Missy are known to be the masterminds behind her second album, many aren't aware that Static also played a huge role in Aaliyah's success. Let me know if these Aaliyah joints sound familiar. We Need a Resolution, More Than a Woman, Loose Rap, I Refuse, Are You That Somebody, Try Again, Rock the Boat, and more. Try Again was nominated and won several awards, while Rock the Boat, Aaliyah's last video filmed before her tragic passing in 2001, went on to top the Billboard charts. Static practically wrote the majority of Aaliyah's music on her last album. Whilst they were shacking up in the studio, supposedly, they'd also been shaking things up within their relationship. Speculations of Static and Aaliyah's relationship had been going on since the establishment of their partnership, but no one ever could quite confirm any romanticizing occurring. That is, until his own mama came out and confessed to y'all that Aaliyah was almost her daughter-in-law. Exaggerating a bit, but Static did end up bringing Aaliyah to his mama's wedding, and word on the street was that he wrote Are You That Somebody specifically for her. After his stint with Aaliyah, who was literally hot like fire during that time, Static's buzz within the industry began to cultivate. He was being hit up more and more for his songwriting, beat making, and producing, and the work was more than abundant. Fortunately for him, songwriting came naturally, and it's been said that unlike other songwriters who jot their lyrics down on paper, Static just had it like that. He was that dude for real. A lot of times he'd go into the stew and record songs off the dome, recording and completing Aaliyah's Are You That Somebody in only 3 hours. He wasn't just the driving force behind Aaliyah's biggest hits. He wrote for other artists that went on to do big things. Before Aaliyah, he worked with fellow Swing Mob dropout Genuine for his smash hit Pony. It didn't just stop there either. Same Old G and the hit that keeps on hitting, So Anxious, are also credited to Static's expertise. From Nas, Jay-Z, Jamie Foxx, and Diddy to Brandy, Destiny's Child, Chris Brown, and Pretty Ricky. Static's catalog is longer than the lines during Black Friday. Static at this point in his career was that ninja. He knew it, and so did the labels like G-Unit, who wanted to sign him and milk him for their own artists to use. However, he wasn't about to jump the fence just yet and decided to stick to Blackground. Pushing out music, Static kept busy writing hits for the industry's top entertainers, but one artist in particular would help him obtain his biggest hit to date, the Carter 3. Lil Wayne's 6th studio album, also known as his crossover into a more mainstream audience, all due to its lead single made by the one and only Static Major. Lollipop's 2008 release spent 5 weeks at the highest peak on the Billboard Hot 100 and is both Wayne and Static's most successful hit to date. Becoming certified diamond by the RIAA, Lollipop sold 9.1 million copies by January 2009 and was named best-selling digital single worldwide, among others. Winning a Grammy for Best Rap Song, Static sang background vocals, the chorus, and was also featured in the music video, which he had shot just 2 weeks before his unfortunate passing. A tribute to Static can be seen at the end of the Lollipop video, and this is where the conspiracy theories roll in. Static met his wife Avanti back in the 90s. After proposing over the phone, serious, he'd make his way over to her residence to propose in person. They ended up having children together, amongst those being his sister's child that he took in after her demise. A week after wrapping the Lollipop music video, Static began to feel sick, but didn't want to put a dent in his future obligations with Little Eazy-E. He thought he was able to tough it out, but he was starting to feel dizzy and proceeded back to his hotel. When the medicine didn't work, he called his wife and mother and told them that he was having a hard time swallowing and could barely speak. They pleaded for him to be checked out at the hospital, but Static was not trying to hear none of that. He dreaded those cold hospital beds and their eerie hallways, but knew something was just not quite right. Against his better judgment, he rolled out of his temporary hotel bed and went anyway. Acid reflux is what they thought he had. Prescribed medicine and H2O should suffice. A couple of days later, his wife picked him up from the airport and noticed her once vibrant, hilarious, and charming husband looking anything but. Now bound by a wheelchair, he looked very much dehydrated and both of his eyes were closed shut. This wasn't the Static she'd known for over 10 years. Something was wrong, and terribly. That same night whilst lying in bed, Avanti heard disturbing noises coming from Static. The time read 3 a.m. He was choking in his sleep. Immediately, she sprung into action, getting him to a hospital as quickly as she could. Upon arrival, the nurses noticed his droopy eyes and assumed he possibly had a stroke. IV fluids helped relieve some tension within his body, soothing him over until his test results they'd gone to run were ready. When everything was all said and done, the doctor believed that Static was dealing with a rare autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis, which attacked the muscles resulting in fatigue. If you ever watched the Fox hit TV musical series Empire, then you may remember when the king of the empire, Luscious Lion, was dealing with the exact same disease. Except myasthenia gravis wasn't what Static had at all, and the procedure to combat this particular disease wasn't even necessary. The procedure that'd ultimately take his life. After kissing his wife and kids, Static began to cry after picking up his 4-year-old who questioned why his eyes were wet. Reassuring his princess that daddy was okay, he placed her down, allowing the doctor to shut the curtain so the procedure could begin. A dialysis catheter was placed in his neck and into his chest to help filter out his blood. While that was going on, Static told Avanti to go fetch a list he had made back at the crib. She was halfway down the hall before she got a gut feeling to turn around and go back into Static's hospital room. Upon entering, Static turned to his wife. A single tear fell from his eye as he looked at her, as if he knew that would be the last time he'd ever see her again. His mom was also in the room. After leaving the room, the doctor began to work on him. Afterwards, the doc got up and left, leaving Static to his own devices. But Static knew something was just not right. Lots of pain took over his body. A nurse tried comforting him by positioning him in a different way, hoping that it'd ease the discomfort, but Static's uneasiness was too much to bear, leaving them no choice but to call the doctor back. Given the instructions to remove the catheter from his neck by the doctor, the nurse did just that, but as she was pulling it out, something went terribly wrong. The more she pulled, the less conscious Static was able to hold. Pulling the catheter all the way out did the opposite of what it was put in to do. By that point, Static was no longer responsive, traumatizing his poor mother, who ran out of the room begging for anybody to help her son. Dialing up Avanti, Mama Garrett gave his wife the rundown of what was occurring. Avanti was in pure disbelief. As she arrived back at the hospital, Avanti scurried to Static's room and was met with loud grunts coming from him as nurses and those around him tried their best to resuscitate him. Pleading with her husband, Avanti would be eventually escorted out of the room. Anxiously waiting on the other side, about an hour passed before they were hit with the devastating news that Static Major, who had been put in the hospital no longer than 12 hours, was officially deceased. Stephen Garrett was pronounced dead on February 25, 2008 at the age of 33. When news broke of his sudden passing, this led to many speculations. The theories came out in droves, but no one seemed to know what really caused his death. Reports of a brain aneurysm or even an overdose hit the blogs, but those closest to Static knew that none of those were the case. When Avanti went back to ask what exactly happened to her husband, it seemed as if no one could give her a direct answer. Once the media got involved, the hospital then came out to say that Static didn't need an autopsy and that he had died from a medical condition. Yeah, no, miss us with that. His family was going to get down to the bottom of things by any means. A private autopsy would soon be had and it'd be disclosed that Static had actually died from respiratory arrest following the insertion and removal of the catheter catheter from his neck. Confirming her suspicions, Avanti filed a malpractice suit against Baptist Hospital East and the doctor who inserted the catheter, Dr. Dean J. Wickel. In court, Dean insists that if the nurse had informed him beforehand of Stephen's pain, he wouldn't have advised her to pull out the catheter on her own. Despite the attempted cover-ups, non-consistent stories, and a suppression of identity and witness statements, the lawsuit would eventually get settled out of court, but eerie revelations would soon be brought to light. It was no secret that Static hated hospitals and was even known to say hospitals kill people. Experiencing the aftermath of his sister passing away in one also didn't soothe his anxiety. The doctor wasn't even supposed to perform the procedure that day. In fact, it was scheduled for the next day. However, the doctor, against his better judgment, decided to go through with the catheter placement that day. Avanti explained that entire unfortunate day as being rushed. Everything felt in a hurry. Some believed that he'd also been given the wrong diagnosis. Instead of myasthenia gravis, after reviewing his case, many believed that Static was dealing with congestive heart failure, similar to what his sister had. Static was laid to rest, surrounded by all of his family, friends, and loved ones. The immense impact Static had on the industry and beyond is literally written in the music. His pen game was highly set apart, and despite being an actual multi-talented artist and the brains behind the biggest hits to top the charts, Static was in the industry, but not of the industry. He never allowed his success to blind him from what truly mattered: his family, friends, and music. Static's legacy continues on through those that knew him best, via his wife Avanti's Save a Life Foundation and the fundraisers she has every November for his birthday. The new wave of talent, including Drake, who sampled Static's music on his Take Care album, Jack Harlow, Bryson Tiller, who received the Static Major Award at the 2016 Kentucky Urban Entertainment Awards, and more have shed light on the genius that was Static Major. He will forever be recognized for changing the trajectory of many careers, and above all else, for being an amazing father, son, friend, and husband. May Static Major continue to rest in peace. Did you know Static Major wrote so many hits? Let us know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments, and stay tuned for more true celebrity stories.